A very good morning to all the participants and our distinguished speaker. I am Amit Kumbhar and on behalf of SAF CRNTS IIT Bombay, I take this opportunity to welcome you all for today's talk on atom probe tomography, titled Atomic Scale Characterization of Material in 3D, an introduction to atom probe tomography, which will be presented by Dr. Devdatta Shinde. Before we proceed, I would like to give a brief overview of SAF IIT Bombay. SAIF IIT Bombay was inaugurated by our late ex-Prime Minister Sri Morarji Desai in the year 1976. DST has set up SAIF in various parts of the country with the objective of providing guidance for the data acquisition using sophisticated analytical instruments. This slide explains how SAIF and CRNTS were established over the years. Currently, Professor Anil Kothanthare is the head of the department. We have around 16 major equipments under SAIF and 5 major equipments under CRNTS. SAIF IIT Bombay provides measurement services to the researchers at IIT Bombay as well as to the users from the various academic institutes, national laboratories, and industries. The current slide shows you the facilities at SAIF IIT Bombay, which are funded by DST. We have upcoming dual beam focused ion beam FIB, which is under installation. This slide shows you the facility at SAIF CRNTS, which are funded by IIT Bombay, out of which APT is the topic of today's talk. This is local electrode atom probe LEAP 5000 XR instrument located at National Facility for Atom Probe Tomography, NFAPT, IIT Madras, which has been formed by 8 founding partner institutions. The partner institutes have remotely operable module empowering them with independent online operational capability of LEAP. This is the first remotely operable LEAP facility in the world. The hardware and software for remote access is located at SAIF IIT Bombay. Professor Anil Kothanthare, head SAIF CRNTS, is the convener at IIT Bombay. This is the format for submitting research proposal to use APT. Workshops are held at IIT Bombay for internal and external users. We also have a YouTube channel where you can find the videos of our previous webinar. You can join us on our LinkedIn account to get the latest update on instruments webinar of SAIF IIT Bombay. All the instruments at SAIF IIT Bombay are operated and managed by dedicated staff. We would be happy to welcome you all and help you with the analysis. Now I introduce to you our today's speaker, Dr. Devdatta Shinde. Dr. Devdatta Shinde is currently working as Scientific Officer D in Material Science Division of Material Group, Baba Atomic Research Center, BARC. He joined BARC through prestigious K.S. Krishnan Research Associateship in November 2018. After completing his master's in physics, he worked as research fellow at Field Emission and Field Ionization Microscopy Laboratory in Department of Physics, University of Pune. Owing to this experience in high field nanoscience, in October 2012, he moved to Rouen, France, Material Physics Group, University of Rouen, to pursue the PhD in atom probe tomography and successfully defended his thesis in January 2016. The prime objective of his thesis was to understand the interaction of laser with the nanoscale tip-shaped sample used in APT and use this knowledge to improve the data quality in APT experiment. After finishing his PhD, Dr. Shinde then moved to Gothenburg, Sweden, Material and Microstructure Division of Chalmers University of Technology for postdoctoral research, where he utilized his fundamental understanding of APT to the real-life problems in the material science. There he worked on different systems like TI alloy, stainless steel, high entropy alloy, etc. Dr. Shinde is one of the very few experts in the country now in the field of APT. He has delivered invited talks in IIT Bombay, IIT Madras, IIT Kanpur on his past and present research. He has expertise in focused ion beam FIB sample preparation for APT and data analysis techniques in APT. We are assured that this talk will be enlighten the knowledge of researchers to use APT for their research purpose. Just an important note, queries related to today's talk should be posted in the question and answer box only. We will be posting the feedback form shortly. Kindly fill it. So let us commence today's talk. Over to you, Dr. Devdatta.
Thank you so much, Amit. First of all, Thank you, Saif,
Yes.
for organizing this talk and inviting me to deliver a talk on atom probe tomography. And I'm very much delighted and happy to deliver this talk. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So I hope most of you are most of you have already heard about this technique called atom probe tomography. And yesterday, Amit also told me that most of you guys have already attended one of my talks, which I delivered to IIT Kanpur. So according to that, actually, I modified yesterday my few slides so that to avoid repetition. So today I'm going to talk, of course, about this technique with few examples from my previous and past research, past and present research, and what I'm doing right now, and what this technique has already been done by some other researchers around the globe, and why this technique is going to be game changer in the field of materials characterization. So to summarize what I was talking about, uh, we most of us, all of us know that characterization of materials is a cumbersome job, and one has to uh, one has to get uh, high resolution images, as well as the chemical sensitivity of that technique should be more. So in this plot one can see number of techniques whether it is imaging technique or whether it is spectroscopic technique. They are summarized in one single plot with on x-axis there is an analytical lateral resolution, and on right y-axis it's a chemical sensitivity in parts per million and as well as in atomic percent. So if you see the place of atom probe tomography is at the top of this chart, which means, for example, if I take a single point in this particular region and I extrapolated where it crosses, so one can see the analytical resolution one can achieve up to 1 nanometer, and as well as chemical sensitivity more or less up to the range of 100 parts per million, and these two in 3 dimension. So there are very few techniques, or almost I will say there is no match for atom probe tomography as far as chemical resolution and 3 dimensional spatial resolution is concerned. Of course, scanning transmission electron microscopy and electron energy loss spectroscopy, that is stands for EELS, can also achieve this much of resolution or even better than this, but APT gives you a 3D view of your material. So owing to this power, atom probe tomography has been the growth of atom probe tomography itself has been tremendous in last couple of decades. One can see on this plot as well the number of APT publications in last decade only, or couple of decades from 2004. From here it is exponentially growing, as well as the number of systems or the number of instruments are also exponentially growing after 2004. Unfortunately, uh, we as Indians are not part of this growth so far. But fortunately, since last couple of years, like from 2017 or even before that 2016, we are slowly taking our APT research moving in a forward direction, and I'm very much hopeful that in near future we will have publications, we will have good number of users in this particular technique, and this kind of webinars will also be helpful to grow the atom probe community in India, as well as the number of users, and knowledge sharing could also increase in this technique. And I'm really happy to share my experience as I'm working in this field for more than 8.5 years, and I have already worked on number of samples from metals, semiconductors, and even insulators using this technique. So I hope my experience will be helpful for you guys. So moving forward directly to the introduction to the APT. So as the name suggests, atom probe tomography, it is a technique one can explain in 3 words only. So the techniques which probes a very small volume of the material atom by atom in 3 dimension is nothing but the atom probe tomography. So when I say the technique which probes a small volume of the material, I was talking about a volume which is around 50 by 50 by 500 cubic nanometer. So this is the interaction volume this technique can analyze. But the only requirement of this technique is the specimen should be in the form of sharp needle. Usually the atom probe community call the sample as a tip. So whenever in this presentation I will have you hear the word tip, it's nothing but I'm talking about the atom probe sample which is in the form of sharp needle. And the radius of the top radius of this sharp needle or the tip should be less than 100 nanometer. So here I'm giving you an example of or SEM image of one of the tips I prepared. So as you can see, the scale bar here in this picture is 100 nanometer. So one can guess the top radius is even less than that. So this is usually the atom probe sample looks like. So I will come to the sample preparation later. So we will move forward with the how this technique works. So as I already said, take a needle shape sample with end radius less than 100 nanometer. So here schematically I have shown one such needle with radius, top radius denoted by R. Then put this sample at cryogenic temperatures. Usually the temperature used in atom probe experiment is from 20 degree Kelvin to 80 degree Kelvin. Then keep this assembly in ultra high vacuum, that UHV, and apply a positive DC voltage which is in the range of 3 to 14 kilovolt depending upon the radius of the tip. So schematically I have shown a few atoms as a red in red and blue color in this schematic, and after applying this field we have a position sensitive detector which is placed in front of our sample, and the distance between the sample and the detector is known, it's called L, or it is usually called as flight path. Then along with the standing VDC or DC voltage, we have to supply extra energy in the form of either voltage pulses or laser pulses. The frequency of these pulses is usually few kilohertz, and in last generation of atom probes, like the Amit showed, the local electrode atom probe, one can achieve as high as 500 kilohertz of frequency. So what happens after applying this standing voltage as well as either voltage or laser pulses, the electric force or the electric field on the top of this on a sphere of, or this radius on the tip is so high according to this formula, that is the lesser the radius, higher the field. So we apply a very strong voltage. This force is quite good enough to dislodge the surface atom. And once these atoms are ionized as a positive ion, then move towards a position sensitive detector as shown in this animation. So one by one, each atoms evaporates and goes towards the position sensitive detector, where we measure or we record the X and Y coordinates of these evaporated atoms. Simultaneously, we also measure the time required for these atoms to travel from the surface of the tip towards the detector. So which gives us the idea about their time of flight. So then just by using the energy conservation, that is kinetic energy is equal to potential energy of the atoms. Here small v is the velocity of the evaporated atoms, and capital V is nothing but the voltage applied, and Q is the charge, that could be positive +1 or +2 charge depending upon what kind of ionization has been take place, and M is nothing but the mass of the atom. So just by reshuffling this equation or by reshuffling velocity, we can have velocity as a distance over time, which is nothing but the flight length over time of flight, and reshuffling this equation we can have a mass to charge which is proportional to time of flight. So combining all this information, we have X coordinate, we have Y coordinate, and we have time of flight of each and every species which is being detected at the detector. And we know that this procedure happens layer by layer, which means the atoms from the inner sample are not going to evaporate first. We have the information that the surface atoms will evaporate first or dislodge first, then the second layer, then the third layer, then the fourth layer. So we have this information that the evaporation or dislodging of atoms is sequential. So considering this information, we can have also the information related to the Z dimension, and all together we will have X, Y, Z, and from time of flight we can identify the nature of the element or the chemical identity of that particular atom. So this is a simple basic principle of atom probe tomography. And moving forward, this whole process is called as field evaporation, as we apply high electric field and the evaporation of atoms is governed by the electric field. The process itself is called field evaporation, and the rate of this field evaporation is governed by a quantity called Q of F, which is nothing but an activation energy which we provide, which is field dependent and also on the temperature of the sample. So considering the APT nature or APT's current status in India, BIRC, that is Bhabha Atomic Research Center, where I work, we have our instrument called, which we called as a FlexTap. It is nothing but an abbreviation for Flexible Tomographic Atom Probe. And as already Amit showed that IIT Madras has a LEAP 5000 XHR, and even IISc Bangalore also has a similar kind of machine. So the basic difference between two machines is that the LEAP is the last generation of the atom probes. Ours is a little bit older, but it gives you the similar results, and sometimes it is also possible to have high mass resolution from FlexTap because of the flexible flight length. And we also have 3 different wavelengths, laser wavelengths, which we can use. As the name suggests, for LEAP, LEAP stands for local electrode atom probe, and the local electrode in that case is that you place the local electrode as shown in here in the image, which it stands for LE, in front of your tip shape sample. Because of this, your field of view increases. You applied a positive potential negative potential to local electrode, so that it acts as a extraction electrode. So because of this local electrode placed very close to the sample, which is almost 40 micron near to the sample, the process of field evaporation is faster compared to what FlexTap has, where we don't have a local electrode. So yes, of course, we have at least 3 working instruments right now in India, and I'm hoping that in near future these instruments will publish a high impact publications. Okay, so right now we'll directly move to the sample preparation. So there are a couple of methods. One of them is the traditional method of preparing sample when sophisticated techniques like focused ion beam was not there. So electrode polishing method was very simple method is there for sample preparation, but this method is limited to only metals and metallic alloy systems. And as one can see in this picture, one has to prepare a matchstick shape like rods, which is around 0.3 by 0.3 by and few centimeter in length. And by using any method, like from bulk sample, you prepare these sticks. Then you have to pinch, or you have to keep this stick in a nickel capillary or copper capillary as shown in the image on the right side here. And then one has to choose an electrolyte depending upon what kind of sample you are preparing. So for example, if it is an iron based system, usually perchloric acid mixed with alcohol is used as an electrolyte. butanol is used as electrolyte. So only a few drop of that electrolyte is placed in this loop, and a potential between sample and the loop is applied, and sequentially the sample is moved back and forth, so that the top part of the bulk sample will get etched electrochemically, and finally we will have so as shown in this schematic. So this ring itself denotes shows the platinum wire or the loop where electrolyte is placed, and you move your sample back and forth in the electrolyte along with when the potential is applied, and sequentially you each or mill your top part of your sample, and you repeat the same procedure until you reach a desired dimension of the sample, which is nothing but less than 100 nanometer diameter. And the sample preparation setup looks quite easy, or not so sophisticated in this case, but again this method is limited to only metals and metallic alloys. Along with that, site specific sample preparation is not possible with this method, as we are not able to see. For example, if I have to prepare a sample from a grain boundary, or I have to look at a triple junction, what happening at the triple junction of 3 grains. So this method is not useful for that, even for metallic samples as well. So that's why one has to opt for a very sophisticated method, that is called scanning electron microscope and focused ion beam method. So I'm guessing that most of you are familiar with what scanning electron microscope is, and I will just explain you how it looks like. The real image of one of the microscope FEI Versa is shown here, and the schematic is shown on the right side. So you have an electron gun, you have ion gun, which is nothing but a gallium ion gun, and then another thing, the add-on here on right side you see denoted by GIS. It is nothing but gas injection system, from where you can inject a platinum or tungsten or whichever available a precursor is there. So SEM, it is possible to do imaging as well as deposition of the platinum or tungsten. Using FIB, we can do imaging, we can also do deposition, but along with that we can do milling. So using gallium ions, we can literally carve the material like a carpenter does a job. The same thing we do it here, but at very fine or minute scale. So gallium beam, using gallium beam, we can carve the sample and make in a shape of sharp needle with end radius less than 100 nanometer. So why gallium is used here? Because gallium's melting point is at nearly room temperature, around 28 point something, so that you don't have to use extra add-on to melt the sample, because these guns, ion guns, is based on principle, or they are usually called LMIS, which stands for liquid metal ion source. So usually the metal ion source is in the form of liquid, and then it is ionized, and then it is after ionization it will it went to the sample and sputter the sample and make the sample of a desired shape and size. So using gallium ions, one can do this procedure. So requirement to do the sample preparation, here I am showing couple of examples. So the left side image, SEM image, is of tungsten post, which can be used in our atom probe as well as in LEAP. But the right side image, which is usually called silicon post, these are flat top silicon post and commercially available. This is only used in the local electrode atom probe. A fine high magnification image, one can show that silicon micro post looks like this. As one can see, the top diameter is around 2 micron, and it is a flat post. So the sample will sit on these posts. So one has to have this flat top post as a support post for your sample. And then instead of going for each and every step, I will explain the sample preparation here in this video. So here, the first thing that note the scale bar here, so that you can have an idea about what kind of minute scale we are going to work on. The first thing is to deposit a platinum deposition. Why we have to deposit this platinum deposition? Because whenever we are going to image the sample with ion beam, it is going to damage our sample, and to protect the sample beneath this platinum deposition is going to protect our sample. Then as I was saying, it is possible to literally carve the sample. So this is what ion beaming is trying to do here. We are literally removing the unwanted sample, and here the sample is free from all the directions except this one. So now I have to take out this sample, so that I will, in this next step, I will insert a micro manipulator now, which will come from in this direction, and then it will be glued here, and then the sample will be cut from the other end, and then it will be lifted out. So this whole process is called FIB lift out. So yeah, so then after lifting out, if you remember, I've shown you the silicon micropost. So then on which we have placed our sample here, and then glued from both sides. So here we deposited platinum on this side as well as on this side, and this is the sample of our interest. And then by using annular milling, the sample is sharp to the desired scale. Yeah, so you're ready with your sample now. So in case of atom probe, sample has a very the significance of sample is very high. Why I'm saying this? Because specimen itself is optics in atom probe tomography. For example, in transmission electron microscope or TEM, once you prepare the sample, to get a better image, one has to do the adjustment on different optics. Like you do the adjustment in condenser lenses, you do the on objective lenses, you do the changes in aperture, so that you can get a good image at the phosphor screen or on the screen. But in case of atom probe tomography, the specimen itself is optics. Why I'm saying this? Because if your specimen surface is smooth, the evaporation of ions is going to be like this, in this fashion, as shown in this image. And the reconstruction protocol also take into account, or the algorithm is based on this assumption that the evaporation of the surface of the sample is smooth and the ions are evaporated in radially outward fashion. But this is not the case all the time. Sometimes the case shown in this image is more often. Like sometimes you have groove in your sample, and this is little bit exaggerated image to show, but at these things are happening at nanometric scale I'm talking about. So this groove or this hump is of nanometric dimensions, and once this happens, there is this local trajectory aberration we call happens. So the ions trajectories get mixed up or get spread out, and then they go to the detector, and the reconstruction protocol doesn't take into account this phenomena. So one has to be very careful with the sample preparation. So the next thing is to find the right parameters. So once your sample is ready, your half battle or half job is done. There are a number of parameters to be taken care of during atom probe experiment, which I have mentioned here, which is nothing but laser energy, base temperature, detection rate, laser pulse rate, pulse fraction if you are using voltage mode. So all these things, all these parameters has to be optimized for every other APT run. Even if you are analyzing, this could also happen that depending upon size and shape, that two samples from the same material will result in different data quality depending upon the if you use the same parameter for them. So this could also happen. So one has to take care of that also. So using taking care of all these parameters is nothing but to improve our data quality. When I say data quality, it's nothing but the mass resolution, signal to noise ratio, thermal trends in mass spectra. I will come to that point later, and the success yield. Most of the atom probe experiments are ended up with a fracture of your sample because you are applying so huge amount of electric field to your sample. Most of the samples, they fracture or get broken, and you end up with no data sometimes, or sometimes you end up with short amount of data. So the success yield, one has to take care also of that factor. So here is a summarized version of how to take care of these parameters from a book by David Larson on local electroatom chromatography. So here the trade-offs are given. So in most of the trade-offs, if you have seen, data quality versus analysis yield. So which is important? The user has to define that whether I am interested in data quality or analysis yield. For example, I have 10 samples and I'm more interested in data quality, then I can think about the analysis. Even if the analysis yield is less, I can see though there is a probability at least one of the samples out of 10 will work. So here in this table, he had summarized that how the pulse rate will what kind of pulse rate will give rise to what kind of things. So for example, higher pulse rate is always better. Base temperature, if it is higher, plus sign is for higher, then it leads to better lower base temperature leads to better spatial resolution, but higher leads to better yield. So if similarly, if you have laser pulse energy which is higher laser pulse energy will give you a higher noise, but lower laser energy will give you a better resolution, but at the same time your analysis yield will get decreased. So it depends on it sample to sample. With trial and error you get the good parameters. So once you have good parameters, then you get a good data, and the raw data is in the form of as shown in this figure. You just have a couple of point or huge number of point data, or usually data is called a point cloud data here. So once you have a data, you have to think like a computational like a how the algorithms will work on this kind of data. So for example, in this case, each and every single dot in this case is an atom with an information of x, y, that too in detector space, and also it has an information of time of flight. Yet we have not calculated the z dimension. So from time of flight, it is possible because we know how much length is there, the flight path we know. So from that one can have the information about mass spectra. And as shown in this image, one can identify each and every peak and give different colors to it. And then the third step is to do the 3D reconstruction. I will come to the reconstruction part later, but here one can see the flow of that. You have raw data, then you do the mass spectra optimization, and then you do the 3D reconstruction. So here one of the data sets of iron chromium system. Those are chromium clusters of radius less than 2 nanometer. So then the first step is that mass spectra optimization. So here I'm showing a mass spectra from a Maraging still. As you can see, number of peaks are one can identify. That is, aluminum is there, titanium is there, iron, nickel, moly, cobalt is also there, and also hydrogen is also there. But this hydrogen is not from sample. This is from the chamber itself. So one can isotopically separate each and every isotope of different elemental species. So a magnified view of titanium peaks from titanium are shown here, where one can quantify each and every isotope of titanium. So this is the positive point of or the advantage of atom probe tomography, is that one can have isotopic quantification of each and every element in your material. And as you can see, the difference between two isotopes is hardly 0.5 Dalton or a atomic mass unit, but still we are able to distinguish between them. Even if there was any peak between them, we are still able to distinguish that. So that is the power of atom probe tomography. So if you remember, I talked about thermal tails in my previous slide. So here in this mass spectra, one can clearly see there is a exponentially decaying tail here. So one should not have this right now. In this case, the magnitude of this tail is very less, but sometimes it could go like this, and the moly and cobalt peak will merge in the noise. So I was talking about this thermal tail, and this happened because of the laser energy used. Another example I would like to give is about zirconium 1 niobium sample. So the first step of every atom probe experiment is the mass spectra optimization. The first thing to do is identify and range each and every mass range in your mass spectra, so that you can move to the next step of 3D reconstruction. So when we move to the 3D reconstruction, the protocol or the algorithm of 3D reconstruction is based on reverse projection. So in this schematic, let's consider this. We have a screen here, and the sample is in the tip shape sample with a radius capital R. This black dot or the black circle, solid circle, is nothing but the original position of the atom, and if it is after evaporation, it moves radially outward, then this is the theta real position, or the angle is the theta real. But this is not the case in real case. Usually, due to electric field lines, this atom will move in a theta observed direction, the red line. So there is a difference of theta real and theta observation, and hence we have to consider this fact for our reconstruction. So and so that if we consider that thing only, then and then only we can back project this atom which we detected on the detector to the sample space. And to consider that fact, we introduce a concept of magnification. So magnification is nothing but the distance on the detector from a center to the radius or the center of the sample space of that on the sample itself. So it is nothing but the capital D by D as shown in here, and by doing some geometric configuration or geometry consideration the geometry of this model, it is found that this magnification is nothing but L by psi into R. L is nothing but your flight path, R is the radius, and this psi is nothing but image compression factor. So if the atom evaporates radially outward, then you have a projection point at the center of your circle. But this is not the case. We usually observe the atom evaporates in theta observation direction, so that there is a compression of actual image than the original image, and owing to this, our projection point is far from the center of this circle. So this factor is also included, and this is called image compression factor. So usually what we observe on the detector is a compressed image of original sample. So that's what one has to take care of. So if you have that value, and there are number of ways in literature to qualitatively find the value of psi, and usually the value of psi is in the range of from 1 or 2 only. So 1, if it is 1, it is radially outward direction, which is radial projection, and if it is 2, it is called stereographic projection. So image compression factor is one of the important parameter. So if you know that, it is possible to have a magnification, and if you know the magnification, then you can say this atom belongs to this place, the other atom belongs to that place. But our radius is not constant. Radius is dynamic. It is increasing because the shape of the tip is not a constant. It has a shank angle. So how to find the radius? So this formula I have given, that electric field is nothing but the voltage over Kf by R. This Kf is nothing but your field factor. So just by reshuffling the equation, one can have the radius as a function of voltage. Kf and electric field value, most of the time these are absolute values, but voltage is also dynamic, that with increasing the radius of the sample, your radius is also increasing. Kf can be determined by using taking into account the if you have a local electrode, then Kf is around 3.3. Then if in our case in BRC atom probe we don't have local electrode, so we have Kf around 6.7. So it depends on the electrostatic environment of the sample, and Fe is nothing but the evaporation field. This again also can be qualitatively defined, depend on what kind of sample you are analyzing. For example, if you are using iron-based system, this could be nearly around 33 volt per nanometer. That is nothing but the evaporation field for an iron atom to dislodge from the surface, which is theoretically calculated, but it matches quite well with the experiment, and that's why we use this information. So but just by using the evolution of radius, one can have the evolution of voltage, one can have the information of evolution of radius also. So these two parameters are very crucial parameters, and just by interplaying with them, it is possible to have a good reconstruction. So there are other methods also that I usually follow most of the time. I usually take a TM image or a SEM image of my sample before analysis, and if possible after analysis also. So for example, in this case, I took an image, a TM image of my sample. So these are the gold nanoparticles. So the bright contrast particles you are seeing is nothing but the gold nanoparticles embedded in iron oxide matrix. So this was a project I was doing during my PhD. So in this case, I have information about the size of the nanoparticles as well as the size of my tip shape samples. So I have a reference point to start my reconstruction, atom probe reconstruction. So by using this information, I'm able to directly correlate my atom probe reconstruction with the TM image obtained. So another example is that, as I said earlier, that take a image before and after the sample. So I exactly know how much depth I have analyzed, and from that information I can do my reconstruction as well. Or I'll take a SEM image and do the radius profiling of your sample as shown in this example, and put this radius definition file in your reconstruction algorithm, so that you can get a radius evolution in this case. So there are different ways to do the 3D reconstruction. So once the 3D reconstruction is done, you are having a good amount of data with you. Now the challenge is to analyze that data. So here I'm showing a couple of examples from Kameka's brochure itself. I found this very interesting, as it sums it up so many other applications. So atom probe tomography is not limited to metals, semiconductors, or insulators only right now at this condition, and it is being used in number of applications, from biominerals to geochemistry to nanoelectronics to photovoltaics. So here are a couple of few examples, like aerospace alloys, metallurgy, material science. It is being used widely over the globe. So I will show you few examples from this as well as from my past experience. So the first example here is nothing but from semiconductors or the transistor. So semiconductor devices, as we know, the electronic properties of devices are very much dependent on the dopant profiling. How the dopant is varying inside the device will decide the fate of that particular electronic device. It is as simple as that. But the scale of this device, we are able to reach the scale of devices as low as 10 nanometer. At this current condition, I think Intel is using 10 nanometer node. So the transistor size has reached as low as 10 nanometer. But we don't have techniques to analyze the chemistry or chemical distribution of dopants at that particular scale. But thanks to atom probe tomography, it is now possible. So here one example is from a processor of AMD Radeon R7 GPU. So here a TM image is shown and the sample is prepared from there only. Here we are showing the upside down reconstruction. Actually, the procedure, the atom probe starts actually from here, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so here are a few regions. So you can take after reconstruction. Another advantage of atom probe tomography is that you can take a sample from your choice, like a region of interest of your choice, and do the treatment separately. So for example, from this region 1, I can generate a mass spectra as shown in here, where I can see silicon is also there and boron is also there. And in second region, which is source to drain region, boron is not present in that region, but a very trace amount of carbon is there. So in this way, I can see how the boron is chemically doped in different regions of transistor. So this is the example of the processor, commercial processor, I will say. And then you can do a one-dimensional chemical profile across source drain region into the channel region as well. So in the channel, one can see the boron is increased. The boron concentration in channel is increased, but if you see the concentration, it is almost nearly equal to 0.1 atomic percent. So at that scale, we are able to analyze or quantify the chemical species. Again, I would like to say here is that boron is not able. We are not able to quantify the boron with any other technique, like except SIMS. But at this scale, it is not possible to quantify boron even with TM. Another example is the arsenic implant profile after rapid anneal and oxide growth. So there are different ways to analyze a single data. So the first one is one-dimensional analysis. You take your reconstruction and do the one-dimensional concentration profile along the reconstructed volume from top to bottom. which is plotted here in this plot. As you can see, the arsenic arsenic dopant implant profile along throughout the depth of the sample can also be measured, and also the oxide profile. Oxide, you don't see any oxide inside the sample, but at the very top of the sample. Another kind of analysis is two-dimensional analysis, where you can have a two-dimensional contour plot or two-dimensional compositional analysis. So you can take a slice of arsenic implant and see how it is distributed in a space. So here one can do a 2D. There is another way to do or treat this data in 3D, as the technique itself is 3D. So we can also do a 3-dimensional chemical measurement using proximity histograms. So in this case, in the last image, one can see different arrows. So usually this proximity histogram calculates the chemical composition in all 3 dimensions in the desired isosurfaces, and then plot a histogram of all the calculations. And then we have a 3D compositional profile. Even if the plot is given here, it is the information is from all the 3 dimensions. So one can measure a 3D composition profile as well. So then moving to another example, this I did during my PhD in France. So here we took a sample which is nothing but gallium nitride, indium gallium nitride quantum wells, and at that time we developed a correlative microscopy approach that we will do the scanning transmission electron microscopy first on our sample, and the same sample is going to be analyzed in atom probe tomography, and then we'll combine both the results that or complement the results will complement each other. For example, for reconstruction, this image for a 3D reconstruction in atom probe tomography, this image will be reference for me. The distance between 2 quantum wells or the thickness of the quantum wells is going to be reference for me to optimize my 3D atom probe reconstruction. So using that information, I did a 3D reconstruction of the data available, and here I am showing only indium atoms. And as you can see in this video, one is able to see all the quantum wells very nicely. Once you have the data, again you do the post processing, you choose single quantum wells, do the indium concentration profile within single quantum well, and see how the indium rich regions are varying within one quantum wells, and look at the trend of different quantum well where the composition of how the composition of indium is varying, and from that we compare these results with the optical emission properties of this device. So, and we concluded that it is quite possible that these indium rich regions act like a quantum dot like structures. If I don't know if anyone is in audience who is interested in such kind of analysis, but but this is one of the very fine results we have obtained at that time. And after that, people are now following this strategy of correlative microscopy, that take a single sample and do the STM as well as the atom probe on the same sample, so as to have unprecedented information. So the results are already published in Nano Letters. One can have a look at it for more details. And the difficult part in this case was to optimize the parameters. So if you are interested how I came up with a good parameters to get a good analysis, then I will request to go through my PhD thesis, in which one whole chapter is dedicated to decide the atom probe tomography parameters, and how I have also explained in that chapter that's how bad parameters or bad experimental parameters in APT will give rise to bad data quality. So I will request you go through this chapter if you are interested to work on such kind of systems. The next example is from my postdoc experience in Chalmers, in Gothenburg, Sweden. So this project was a collaboration between different commercial steel companies as well as institution from like Chalmers and KTH Institute in Stockholm. And the idea was to study the early stage of sigma phase precipitation in in commercial austenitic stainless steel. So here is a EBSD image. As one can see at the grain boundary, we are able to see some sigma phase. And then I prepared, I took a same sample. As one can see in this SEM image, I'm able to identify the same image as in EBSD. And then I prepared the sample from this grain boundary exactly at the boundary of phase boundary of sigma as well as in austenite phase. And then I prepared atom probe sample from there, as one can see in this image. And then after atom probe, I'm able to see sigma and austenite different phases. And then I've shown different elementals, atomic distribution of different elemental species. So it is quite possible to identify boron, phosphorus, and carbon low Z elements which are segregated at the grain boundaries. So it is also possible to measure the different atomic species, how they are varying from one phase to another phase, and how the interface definition is there, whether it is a sharp interface, the concentration dip is very sharp. So it is possible to do that study using proximity histogram, as I have explained in the previous case. So here is, it was another example. So this example, so I've been moving to another example, which is nothing but iron 35 chromium alloy. This alloy is based for so many duplex stainless steel, and also it is being used in thermal in our nuclear power plant. The base is iron chromium. So here thermally aged different samples are the chromium atomic distribution is shown here. As one can see, the first atomic distribution is for ATS solutionized sample, then 1 hour aging at 500 degrees centigrade, 10 hour, 550 hour, 120 hour, and so on. So as one can see, the chromium distribution is being non-random, and it has some spinodal structure. If there are some people in the audience who are from metallurgy, they will know what I'm talking about. So spinodal decomposition phenomena is nothing but it forms two different phases, alpha and alpha prime. Alpha prime is chromium rich phase, alpha is iron rich phase, and they look interconnected. So it is also possible to quantify that phase. So here I am showing two phases, they're interconnected together. So chromium rich phase is in red and iron rich is in blue. So there are different ways to represent the data. The another way is to I take a data set and take a 5 nanometer slice in X direction and move that slice in that X direction, so that I can have a visualization of chromium atoms in 3 dimensions, how it is moving. So here also we can see the chromium rich regions, they have a different orientation or different way of spinodal decomposition. So in this case, actually we quantify the wavelength and amplitude parameters using atom probe tomography data analysis, and we compare those results with small angle neutron scattering data. And this paper is about to get published very soon in Materialia, and please look forward it if you are interested in this kind of study. The another example is from the same model alloy, but with different chromium concentration, that is iron 20 chromium. So here also we can see different chromium rich regions. Again, alpha prime is chromium rich regions, and here the phenomena of phase separation is nucleation growth. In the previous case, it was spinodal decomposition. Here it is nucleation growth. So same system, different decomposition mechanisms or different phase separation mechanisms can be studied by atom probe tomography. And it is also even possible to take one of the precipitate and see the lattice or the atomic lattice within the 2 nanometer precipitate. This one is also getting submitted in microscopy and microanalysis. So yeah, number of papers are in pipeline. Next example is from the literature, and this is the last example I will say. But this is really interesting. As I said earlier also, the atom probe tomography is being used by number of scientists, no matter what kind of field they are working. So this is a particular example I would like to end with my talk. So this is nothing but uranium, thorium, lead geochronology. So geologists published this article in 4 years ago, I think 2016, in Nature Geoscience. So what they have done in this case, so using uranium, thorium, lead geochronology, one can date the sample. So in this case, they have taken a zircon. Zircon is nothing but a mineral which has a chemical formula zirconium, silicon, and oxygen. So ZrSiO4. So in this case, they took a zircon crystal as old as 4.4 billion year old. So which is equal to almost age of our Earth. So of course they have dated this sample later, and which which they found it. The age of the sample was around 4.4 billion year old. So how this thing work? So usually when the zircon crystal is formed 4 billion years ago, uranium and thorium was already there, but not lead. So whatever lead is in the sample is radiogenic, means that lead is formed after uranium and thorium decays with time by alpha irradiation. So uranium 238 isotope, uranium 235 isotopes decays by emitting alpha to lead. And if uranium 238 is decaying, then it will give you the lead 206 isotope, and if uranium 235 is decaying, then it will give you lead 207 isotopes. So by taking a ratio of these isotopes, geologists usually take this plot. The solid line in this plot, or this plot is called Concordia plot, and the solid line is nothing but depending upon the ratios of these isotopes gives you, and taking into account the half-life of uranium 238, uranium 235, or this transition, one can guess the age of that particular sample. So this solid line is a reference, and after your calculation you match with this line. So these guys from University of Wisconsin, they did atom probe tomography on this sample, and this technique was age-old technique. That people, uranium, thorium, lead geochronology is being used by number of researchers before, but before this publication, it was always on the bulk sample. So you never know what's happening at very minute scale, and that's why it is published in Nature Geoscience, and they were able to find that a small 10 nanometer clusters of which yttrium clusters are there, and it also had some lead in that case, and they have also differentiated the lead to isotopes of lead, that is 206 isotope and 207 isotopes within 10 nanometer clusters. So that is the power of APT. And if you see how much data they have collected for this particular sample, the Z dimension, as you can see, it's more than 1 micron, and total 400 million atoms they have collected for this data set. So day by day, this technique is pushing its limit, and it is being used by a number of authors and number of researchers. Sorry. So the last slide is the recent developments. So I will not spend too much time, but it's a worth mentioning that the holy grail of metallurgy, that observation of hydrogen at dislocations or grain boundaries or precipitates, is also doable using atom probe tomography. So please check these papers if you want more detail about how these guys from Australia have done this. And with that, these are the references I've used for this particular talk, and also wherever I have cited the papers. So in nutshell, actually, I just want to say this technique is going to be game changer in near future, and I hope that in near future we will have more and more user as well as more and more researcher using this particular technique, as we are now we can use the technique from IIT Madras, where ISC Bangalore, or even in BRC. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your kind attention and patience, and I would like to take this opportunity to wish you a very happy new year, and happy and prosperous and healthy and new year. Thank you so much.
That was an informative talk. We have certain questions lined up for you. The first question is by Mr. Ankur Sharma. Can we determine atomistic origin of dynamic strain aging through APT?
I'm not aware of what concept is this dynamic strain aging, but by that method, if there is a change of composition in the material, then answer to that question is yes. Actually,
it's a linked question. Can we investigate oxidation state of elements similar to yields accurately at specific location?
No, oxidation state we cannot identify, but as I said, if there is an element and we can isotopically separate that, if iron is there, iron has 4 isotopes, we can separate those 4 isotopes, but not the oxidation states.
All right, another question is by Mrs. Kritika. What is the difference between 1D concentration profile and proximity histogram, and which one is more appropriate for data representation?
Okay. As the name suggests, 1D profile itself is a one-dimensional profile. So you select one particular region of your sample, then put a region of interest across that region and take a concentration profile in one particular direction. So that's what suggests 1D composition profile. Proximity histogram is a 3-dimensional compositional profile. So for example, you have a precipitate and you want to measure a composition inside and outside the precipitate in 3 dimensions, then the proximity histogram will try to measure the composition in each and every direction and plot the histogram. On the other hand, 1D concentration profile will just go from one single dimension defined by the user. So in this particular case, I will always go with the proximity histogram. But 1D profile is useful to identify the how much dimension it is in. For composition measurement, I will always prefer proximity histogram.
Thank you, sir. Another question is by Mr. Raman, who's a student from geological background. He is curious about the application of APT, which focuses on identification of carbon and nitrogen-based molecules such as collagen, present in very minute quantities in fossils. So the first question related to this is it possible to use this technique on more complex organic molecules as opposed to the single element examples you have shown here?
Yes. It's not very often people have used this technique for organic molecules, but people not in India, but somewhere, I think from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, people have started to analyze the organic materials. Like I exactly don't remember which one, but I can go through the literature and come back to this answer. But yes, people have started to analyze such kind of materials. Yeah, if you
Related
have,
to this only,
yeah,
it is since the samples are not homogeneous, so
yeah,
is it first necessary to isolate the target molecule which is present in low quantity from the surrounding matrix before sample preparation?
yeah, yeah. The sample constant is always going to be there. As I said, the sample has to have in the form of solid, and it should be shaped as a needle shape with end radius less than 100 nanometer. This sample requirement is always going to be there. So what people have done, they usually embed this in something else, like some resin or some other materials. They embed this material, or the material you are interested in, and then they form a tip shape sample, and then they analyze. So a friend of mine from Sweden, actually he analyzed protein molecule itself. So protein, and so he embedded that protein in a silicon oxide matrix, and then he prepared the sample, and then he did the atom probe tomography. So definitely it's possible, but again, it's not very straightforward. So yeah, please.
Thank you, sir, for answering our questions. We have an upcoming webinar next week on scanning transmission electron microscope and related techniques. The link is provided on our website and registration is open now. Thank you so much, Dr. Devdatta Shinde, for giving us your valuable time and delivering us the talk. A special thanks to our head, Professor Anil Kotantharayil, for initiating a webinar series of instruments housed in CEF CRNTS IIT Bombay. We would like to thank the electron microscopy team and IT team for their valued support. Thank you to all the participants for making this event successful. Stay healthy, stay safe, have a very nice day. Thank you.